Hey everybody, Shane here, Shoebox Legends. Thanks for joining me for a quick video response episode today. This one is going out to my buddy Jayson, aka MrFisherbike, here on YouTube. You can find the link below in the event that you're not already connected with Jayson, but great member of the community. Jayson collects a ton of different things, and he's looking at getting more into vintage baseball. And so he put the call out there to everybody to do some VRs showing your favorite vintage cards, or maybe like a top 10 list of your favorite vintage cards. Now that is a tall order, and as everyone else who made one of these has basically said, you've probably heard it before, it's almost impossible to pick a true top 10. So I'm just gonna go with, these are 10 vintage baseball cards that I love. We're gonna leave it at that. The two that you see up in the background did not make the cut. They're just there for you to look at while I was gabbing during the intro. So let's start on the 10. The first 4 of these are gonna come from my favorite vintage baseball set ever made, 1953 Topps. We have the Mount Rushmore, as we talked about on a recent live stream that I did related to this set, of the 53 Topps release, starting with Mickey Mantle, iconic card number 82, probably the card that I wanted more than any other vintage baseball card when I was a kid growing up, thanks to that Archives release that came out in 1991. And I just feel so honored to have this beautiful copy in the collection. Probably the oldest Mickey Mantle card I'll ever own, at least for the foreseeable future anyway. And yeah, just a top 20 card in my collection, and always will be, just because of that childhood desire to own that card and that archive set. So love that one. The second one in the 53 Mount Rushmore, and probably my favorite of the 4, the Satchel Paige. Look at this beautiful card. It's simply glorious. This is one of only, I think, 3 playing era cards that exist of Paige. The others being Bowman and Leaf cards from the late 40s. Those are both mini cards, so this is the only full-size card of Satchel where we can appreciate the artwork here in its large style format that exists. And I love that you can get one single card, although it's not a cheap acquisition, and you can have a complete Topps playing era run of one of the greatest pitchers and one of the kind of more fascinating names and stories in baseball past. So the Paige is a giant card. Love that one. Third in the Mount Rushmore from 53 Topps, we have the Jackie Robinson. This is a card that I picked up just this past year after downgrading. I had a PSA 6 that I was not a huge fan of. It was really off center and yellowed a little bit. So I sold that. Used the money to buy this 4, and then a bunch of other awesome cards that I've been showing off here on the channel. This is probably my favorite overall Jackie Robinson card ever made. I do have a couple of his from later in the 50s, but this one is just simply amazing. I love the artwork. The painting is amazing. The background is great. That smile. This is the card that I think of if I close my eyes and try to picture Jackie Robinson. This is the card I think of. So had to put this one into my kind of 10 vintage cards I love here. I won't call them my favorites. And then the 4th and final card from the Mount Rushmore. This is a card that I've never shown on my own channel here, but I did use this recently in that live stream with my buddy Joe over at Four Soft Corners, Theo, Clemente Collector, and Matt from The Card Story, where we did a small live stream on 53 Topps and commemorating Joe's completion of the set, which is insane. And that was the first time that I ever showed my Willie Mays. And so thought this video was a good opportunity to introduce this card on my own channel. And yeah, I love it. It's definitely, again, probably the oldest, at least for the foreseeable future, Willie Mays that I'll ever own. And I love that it's a full kind of action shot here. It's also a high number from the 3rd and final series of the release, which makes it a pretty difficult card to obtain. There's certainly plenty of them out there. It's not impossible by any means, but gorgeous Willie Mays. So with those 4 53 Topps cards out of the way, let's use the other 6 slots here to do some non-53s and mix it up a little bit. We'll start off with the 1 card, or I guess the 2 cards that are even older than those on my list. So from the 1951 Bowman set, chose this Ted Williams just because I know Jayson is a fellow Red Sox fan. Ted Williams, I think, is the greatest player ever to suit up for the Boston Red Sox, my favorite team as well. So I had to work a Ted Williams into this countdown. And as far as just pure aesthetics and a gorgeous looking card, this is probably my favorite Williams. So it just made sense to select that 51 Bowman. And then the oldest card that I picked out, another one that I've shown recently, so I don't want to be too repetitive here, but the Joe DiMaggio from 1940 play ball. I funded this with the sale of a soccer card that I pulled out of like a $2 pack, which was just insane, but never in a million years thought I would own a playing day Joe D. Just an absolute icon. I'm going to keep it brief because I did show this just recently in a VR that I did for Dylan, Double D vintage baseball cards, but had to include the Joe D. So that takes us up to 6. For number 7, we have one more kind of big card here. And this one I chose for a reason. So it's the 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson rookie card. And I think this card is intriguing, and it's a good card for a countdown like this or a favorite list like this, because it does kind of beg the question, what do you define vintage as? And I am one of those people who firmly believes vintage it kind of contains all the cards from after World War II up until and through the 1980 Topps release, because in 1981, Donruss and Fleer came into the game. And one of the things I love that I've heard said about this card is it's almost the last true rookie card, because anybody 1981 or after, they got multiple official rookie cards just because there were different companies involved. 1980 was the last year of the Topps monopoly on baseball cards. And so many reference this as the last true rookie card. And it's the final year that I personally consider to be vintage. And so for those reasons, I thought this Rickey was the perfect selection to make the list of 10. And then, the 7 cards that we just looked at, they're all pretty expensive. And I just have them because I've been fortunate enough to have been at it for a long time. I bought many of these before prices were what they are today. But I wanted to include some more affordable cards on the list just to drive home the point that, great vintage baseball cards don't have to be expensive, iconic cards like the ones that you see in the background. You can do very well without spending a lot of money. And here's an example. This is the 1958 Topps All-Star Mickey Mantle. Gorgeous card. And this is very significant because it's not anywhere near the cost of like the 53 Mantle in the background or most of his other playing days cards. But number one, it is just gorgeous. Like, the color on this card is amazing. And number two, it's important in the history of the hobby because these were the very first Topps All-Star subset cards ever made. And that's a practice that Topps still does to this day. And it all started here with these 58s. So not an expensive card as Mantle goes, but it's very, very important and just a key vintage card to target if you want to get into Mantle or just a good generic vintage run. Next two are going to be very cheap as well. This card I paid under $100 for, even in a PSA 4 within the last couple of years. The 1961 AL Home Run Leaders card from 62 Topps. So obvious why I would choose this one, but it represents one of the greatest record-breaking feats that occurred in the vintage era, and of course established Roger Maris as the guy, at least for 61 years until Aaron Judge came along. So I think this is just an incredibly important vintage card if you like tying your cards to the history of the actual game, which I do. And so you could do a lot worse with $100 to spend on vintage than to pick up a nice clean copy of the 62 AL Home Run Leaders card. And then in a similar vein, last but not least, this is even cheaper, the only card to make the list from the 70s today, the 1974 Topps Hank Aaron All-Time Home Run King card. Card number 1 on the checklist, the card that Topps infamously and ballsily released prior to him breaking the record, just in anticipation that he would break the record early in the 74 season, which thankfully he did, making this card come true. But the fact that they printed this up ahead of time while he was still shy of holding the record is just awesome. It makes for a great story, a great card, one of the best athletes of his era and ever to swing a bat. And I chose this card because, I could have gone with the Hank Aaron rookie card. That's a whopper, like some of the ones that we saw in the beginning of the video. I think this card is equally cool. I love this card just about as much as I do his rookie card, just because of everything that it represents. And you can obtain copies of this for a pretty cheap coin. I got this well-centered copy here from my buddy Dylan in a trade that we did. But prior to that, had a copy that was, not very expensive either. If you're not looking for a PSA 8 or 9, or you even want to buy this card ungraded, which is great too, you can easily find this for like $50 or under in really, really fine shape. that anybody would be happy with. So an important Hank Aaron and one that will not break the bank. I thought that was a good way to end the 10 vintage cards that I like VR. So I may be too late for this. I don't know when the cutoff was, Jason, for your contest, but it wasn't really about that. It's more about supporting you, giving you a shout out, and giving you a look at some great vintage cardboard. So I really appreciate the opportunity and the reason to dig these out and shoot this video. Hope you saw one or two that appealed to you here as you're getting more into vintage. And to everybody else, I appreciate you spending 10 minutes of your time checking out these vintage beauties. As you know, I'll be back in the very near future with some more sports card content. Until then, take care and enjoy the hobby, everybody. See ya.